Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Dr. Craig Kasper from NYHD and the Institute for Hearing and Balance based in New York City. And we're back with another episode of the Audiologist at Home episodes. That's where we're stuck at home, you guys are stuck at home, and we're talking about some topics in the area of hearing and balance that we hear in our practice on a day-to-day basis, and some questions that you guys are sending through to us at the info@newyorkhearingdoctors.com email address. And today I have my wonderful colleague, Dr. Ariella Naim. How are you?
Hello, I'm good. Still hanging in there.
Still hanging in there. I think we're doing more than hanging in there. I think, as a society, you kind of realize how resilient most people are, especially when you get into situations like the one that we're all in globally right now.
Absolutely.
So we
Absolutely.
have a really interesting question today. It's kind of on an offshoot path in the world of hearing aids, but this is something that you focus quite heavily on in our practice. So I figured it would be an appropriate question for you. So you ready?
I'm ready.
Awesome. Okay. So the question is, what is a cochlear implant?
So a cochlear implant, it's actually a surgically implanted device where really the easiest way to explain it is that I like to think of it as a device that's actually taking over and taking over the function of the healthy inner ear, or mimicking the function of a healthy inner ear. Now, what I mean by that is that if we have someone, let's say, with a mild to severe hearing loss where they still have usable word recognition ability, we're able to give them a hearing device with amplification. They're going to get that clarity and the benefit that they need.
A traditional hearing aid, you mean, correct?
A traditional hearing aid, exactly. Okay. But if we kind of switch to a different population where we have someone with a moderate to profound hearing loss with really no usable word recognition ability, they're going to need something like the cochlear implant to help take over what really is kind of dead regions or significant damage to those hair cells in the inner ears, and just to stimulate those areas so that the brain is able to process those sounds. Now, the way it's done is that, like a typical hearing aid or a traditional hearing aid, there is that external component that either sits behind the ear or actually can sit on the head itself. Now, that part picks up the sounds through the microphones and processes it. But what sets it apart really from a traditional hearing aid is that you actually have an internal component that sits right under the skin, right over here. Now, what that internal component does is that it sends those sounds that it picked up from the external component into an electrode that's placed inside the inner ear. And then from there, we're stimulating the nerve directly, and the brain is processing those sounds.
So there's a part that's surgically implanted. So that's a component that we're not going to get into necessarily, but there's a wire essentially that's surgically implanted into the inner ear.
Mm-hmm.
There's a part on the outside that's worn, and sound is transmitted to that wire essentially that will stimulate the nerve, the hearing nerve, and ultimately the sound goes up to the brain where the person hears.
Exactly.
So that's sounds like something that's not for everybody, clearly, and it's reserved for people, as you said, who have more significant hearing loss, who don't have the speech clarity, the word clarity that someone who might have lesser of a hearing loss might have. So maybe we can talk a little bit about the concept of who's a candidate really outside of that. So like once you move into the conversation of a cochlear implant as a possibility, but how do you determine the difference between hearing aid and cochlear implant?
So that's a really good question. Now, it's not just so the way that we go about even starting that conversation is that you need to actually see that you're not gaining benefit from traditional hearing aids. The way we do that is that there is actually a battery of tests that we go through. Now, again, this is talking about a population where they've had maybe, let's say, progressive hearing loss. I'm not talking about people who from like congenital hearing loss. Now, we can start off with the person who has started with traditional hearing aids, but as we go through life, or for whatever reason, due to any number of reasons, their hearing loss can progress. The word recognition deteriorates as well. And even when we start using those accessories like a remote mic, they're still not doing well in, let's say, quiet and especially background noise. Now, the battery of tests that we sit through, it is lengthy, but it will give us a score to see what that benefit with the hearing aids is. And typically for adults and children, it's definitely different what that score needs to be under. But really we're looking at that word recognition ability or the function of the hearing nerve itself.
Gotcha. So it's not just about the degree of hearing loss per se. It's about whether or not they benefit from traditional hearing aids, what scores on standardized traditional tests are in this comprehensive battery for a cochlear implant candidate or potential candidate might be. It sounds, and it is much more complicated than we can cover clearly in a 6-minute video. And I know that it's really hard to kind of condense it in without really kind of taking more time to go into details.
And I don't have my diagrams with me, so.
Yeah, I realized it was a kind of a hard question, but I figured it was a worthwhile question though, because we do have patients, and there's a lot of people out there that have hearing loss that may or may not be benefiting from their traditional hearing aid options. And they have to understand, and I'm sure they do, but in case they don't, there are other options that are not your traditional air conduction hearing aid that's on the market, essentially.
Exactly.
And the only way to know for sure is to see someone like you, to have this assessment done, and the counseling, which is quite extensive also from what I've witnessed with you.
Which is the biggest part of it.
Which is the biggest part of it, yeah. And it's you have to also determine, I'm guessing, like any other type of healthcare situation, you have to make sure someone is psychologically ready for something like a cochlear implant. So it is a commitment, but it's definitely something that, it's not something new. It's been around forever, and it's something that definitely helps people where they cannot be helped in other ways. So
absolutely.
Awesome. Well, I know that was a hard question. I'm sorry.
No, it was good.
You did a great job though. So for anybody out there who has more questions for us, if you want to try to stump Dr. Naim for the next one, we'll do info@newyorkhearingdoctors.com. We'll try to get to answer as many questions as possible. We appreciate everybody for watching. We hope everybody is healthy and well. Yes. And Dr. Naim, stay well yourself, and we will speak soon.
You too. Yes, definitely.
Take great care.
Bye.